Friends and folks, welcome to the Kaiju Lounge, your home for humor, opinions, and nerd shit. And my guest tonight is a designer, game developer, and one half the team behind Holy Wow Studios, makers of the hit indie rhythm game Trombone Champ, which recently announced it is getting a VR release under the name Trombone Champ Unflattened, with many new features. Take a look.
And so it comes to pass. Brave soul, one day you will stand before two baboons. One day you will rend the very fabric that binds this land. But until that day comes, you must toot.
Please welcome to the show, Dan Vecchitto. Dan, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Busy, but all things considered, pretty good. How's it going with you?
It's been great. It's been going well. I want to immediately pick up where I left off with your wife when I had her on, which is where are we on Himbo House?
Oh man, I shouldn't even have brought that up. Well, that's really funny. It's we haven't thought about Himbo House in a while. So for those who are watching who have no idea what we're talking about, like we have like so many game ideas, like when we released Trombone Champ, we were under the impression that we'd be able to like start a new game like right away. It's like, the game's done, it's out, so like time to start a new game. But in real life, there's just so much work to be done. Like we've been updating it like crazy and porting it, and it's just like it's never ending. But we do have this like flurry of ideas for like new games that we really want to work on, And Himbo House is one of them. I still like that idea a lot. Should we talk about? Should we just start talking about?
No,
Himbo House
I think absolutely. We've got a full hour, so we'll get to the big stuff on Trombone Champ in a bit. But like from what I remember, you guys were just coming off of some playthroughs of Night Trap. And you were in a full FMV mindset with regards to Himbo House, correct?
Yeah, like we had this funny idea that would be like a kind of a gender swap Night Trap. So if you've never seen Night Trap, you're like there's like a bunch of like teenage girls in a house. You need to rescue them from vampires. So we're thinking it'd be fun if it was just like a house full of like beefy, just like bros who are all just like really dumb and like himbos, and you need to save them. And we just like really lean into the humor of it, because Night Trap, like it's funny
so
by modern.
It's
silly. It's like unintentionally funny. It's one of those games,
Yeah.
But like it also, all of our games have been funny so far when we really lean into the humor. So we're thinking too, like we could really lean into the humor for this one. Like if we like, this would be more of like a film project than a game project almost, because it would be all FMV. So we'd have to like spend a lot of time writing the script and making sure it was really solid. I'm not sure if it'll ever happen, because we have other ideas now that are probably a lot more achievable. We're always thinking about like what our next big game will be. We think we have the idea down for the next one, but there's like 3 or 4 big ideas that we're still kind of torn between,
Yeah. Well,
it's tough.
One of the things I loved about the idea that was brought up was just because the fact that like that was such a flash in the pan time and game, right? Like there were so many FMV. I remember, especially because I was primarily a Mac user as a kid in the 90s and early 2000s. So I think we had almost more FMV games than we had actual like
games.
computer games at the time. And because of that, it's just, or like even things like You think of the brothers in Myst, or
Yeah.
Tim Curry in the Frankenstein game. It's like it was such a time that we were really
Yeah.
trying to drive that home, and I'm shocked that no one no one on the indie scene has mined that yet as like a throwback. We're seeing throwback PS1 style graphics. We obviously pixel art has been king forever in the indie scene, but like I'm shocked no one's really leaned into like that or
Yeah.
the Mortal Kombat form of game capture. I think
It's like
there's
photographing guys. Yeah.
I think it's untapped potential in the indie market.
I forget the guy's name, but the guy who made Her Story is kind of like that.
Yes,
Because Her Story is
exactly.
all FMV. And then there was another game that came out by the same designer that came out the same year as Trombone Champ. I forget the name now. I want to say Pentiment, but it has a name like Pentiment, but something like that. It's supposed to be actually excellent, and I really want to play it, but that's all like FMV, I think.
Yeah,
But I
which
don't know
is
anything about it besides the fact that it's all FMV. Yeah.
But it's such a what a way to cross, even if you're doing something serious, like what a way to
Yeah,
cross mediums there.
it's true. And also that guy, I think his games are very serious.
Yeah.
Like, and we're kind of the exact opposite generally.
But
Like, yeah.
and there's room for both, just like
Mm,
there is room for comedy in rhythm games.
mm,
So let's get into that. I talked to Jackie. It was right around the time the Switch port released.
okay. Yeah.
There's definitely been a bit of a gap between now and now you've got the VR game
Mm.
coming out. Before we get into that, how has the period between that Switch release and now been? What has been going on with you guys?
Kind of the same. I mean, we had like a roadmap of things we wanted to do for the PC version. Like,
Mm,
ultimately, like by the time the game was finished, we wanted to have like a level editor in the game and have like Steam Workshop integration.
yeah.
And we're considering, I'm still not sure if we're going to do it, but we're considering bringing like the local multiplayer that's in the Switch version to PC as well.
Wow.
So we're still just like working on PC stuff actually. Like we just released a big update which added like a first preview of the level editor, which is built right into the game now. It's like
That's
in the settings
awesome.
menu. Yeah, thanks. Like I'm actually really pumped about that. At the moment it's like we're calling it a beta. It's like a preview and it's kind of secret. But it's actually like it took a long time to make, Like we had this like horrible level editor in the game that, I was using to make the levels when we're actually making the game in the first place. But it
Hmm.
was, only for my use only. Like literally
It,
like I was the
it
only
it
person who was
wasn't as
using it.
intuitive for like a user to just hop in and
Oh,
jump
it was
into.
horrible. Like you had to use like, it was ugly. You had to use the arrow keys to like, pop left and right, and like you had to push N to make a note, and like there's no undo. So
Oh
it was like
yeah.
pretty much like I could use it, but it wasn't releasable. So we basically started with that and then just like polish it up until it's, good enough for the general public. And also we tried to make it like really friendly because a bunch of modders and stuff have already made um level editors and stuff already.
Right.
So people who really want to do this, who are like power users, will already be doing it. So we're kind of hoping to make something like really user friendly that's like right in the game so that like, more casual players or like maybe like young kids or something can take a crack at it. Because
Yeah.
I know like for me too, that's a big thing. Because like when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time like making levels and content for games and stuff. So like I would really love it if like imagining like actual kids like trying to make stuff in the game rather than just playing the game. It's a little more
Right.
like it's it's a little more creativity there. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
and
But we'll see. Yeah.
it's such a way to encourage. I mean, like again, it's a silly game. There
Yeah.
are hot dogs and
Yeah.
baboons and a
That's
little
true.
devil. Like it's a very silly game, but at its core, playing music is a form of artistic expression.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we talk about gaming, we don't talk about necessarily artistic expression from the player base in gaming,
Mm.
usually from the developer base. So, just as I mentioned before, the bridging the gap between, I meant it as a good transition, and
Yeah.
it was good. I'll say for myself, but it truly is. It's a way of bridging the gap between artistic mediums. Like
Mm.
underneath it all, there is some real art. There's a real artistic element to that, which I don't want to ignore with something like Trombone Champ when at face value it is still a very silly game.
Yeah. I wish it was a little more creative actually. Like that would be fun. Like some of the jazz tracks have like improv zones where you can play whatever you want for a fixed duration. And like, in retrospect, like it would be really cool if like there were a lot more of those and it actually like saved your solo somehow and
Oh,
you know what I mean?
interesting.
And like scored them. But that's just really difficult and we're not that good at what we do. So it's like so that's not gonna happen. But
I
like
mean, that being said,
yeah.
you're still adding on to this. Like I do want to ask,
Yeah.
when in your head is this game finished, or is that kind of is that a spiral?
I will die if I work in this game for much longer. We're both really burnt out on it, like because even before the game came out, I was working on it like nights and weekends for about like 4 years or three
Right.
years. Again, not every single night, not every single weekend, but like a lot of time for years. And so now it's been like in total, like I guess 6 years or a little more
Wow.
since we started. Um, only like two since the PC version came out, but like still like six in total. There are some indie devs like what's his name, like the Stardew Valley guy,
Yeah, concerned
who
it.
like
Right.
yeah, and like he's still updating it, and it's been like 9 years, and I think like that's his baby, and he's content doing that till the day he dies. And probably is true of like some people like in Mojang and stuff working on Minecraft, but I want to make more stuff. And also it is, I mean, we're still selling copies, but it's definitely slowing down. So
Yeah,
it's probably not
understandable.
even that smart to work on this for that longer. And like especially now, we have so many ideas, like with even with Trombone Champ and like things we can do. But now I think like we're becoming more mindful of like what could theoretically be like a Trombone Champ 2 feature. Not
Hmm.
that we're gonna make Trombone Champ 2 like as soon as we finish working on Trombone Champ 1, but like, probably at some point it would make sense to do it,
Yeah.
with a team helping us. And like so we're thinking about that too. Like any new stuff or like should this be like just in a Trombone Champ 2, or like a or I don't want to say remaster because everything's being remastered, but like an updated version or something. But that
Right.
being said, I think like 2025, will be the year that we pretty much like stop Trombone Champ work, except for like minor fixes and updates and stuff, because we might have to do some stuff just for technical stuff, and might add a song now and then. But like that'll be the year we really start a new project.
That's
I hope
great.
it has to
That
be.
yeah. Well,
I can't imagine. Yeah,
well, yeah. I mean, you
yeah,
you, you mentioned that as
yeah.
from the player side and from
Mm,
from the fan side, we only really see, and especially with something like Trombone Champ, and you guys,
mm.
you're doing this in your spare time. It's
No, we do
not
it full time. We're
well
full time
well
now. Yeah,
now, yeah,
yeah,
now,
yeah,
but I mean,
yeah, yeah.
getting it started, right? It's like
Yeah,
it's not like I'm trying to Duke Nukem, where all 10 years of
mm.
its development, I knew it was happening, right? Like
That's true. Yeah.
in this case, you guys were relative unknowns, and this was a big breakout hit for you here.
Yeah.
Um, so like from the fan perspective, we don't think about
Mm.
the fact that it was, we think about the release onward. We don't always think about the early stuff. What
Yeah.
what kept you going during all that? Like to work on something for 6 years before
Yeah.
it's even released. I've got ADD. I
Yeah.
can barely finish making breakfast half the time. Like
It
how?
wasn't, yeah. It was more like probably 3.5 to 4 years, probably, I would say. But, from start to release.
Right.
Part of it's just like the sunk cost thing. Like there were certainly times where I was just like really sick of it, and
Yeah.
like it's really hard to continue. But I'm a proponent of the idea that you just do like 30 minutes a day sometimes, and like that adds up tremendously. And 30
Mhm.
minutes is not long, like that's like one episode of something on Netflix, just like do something, anything, and that
Right.
will eventually add up. But it's true of gaming, but it's true of like everything where they say like the last 1% takes 99% of the time. And that's absolutely true with development too. Like I feel like we had like gameplay pretty early, and like, the gameplay was looking good pretty early, and that doesn't take that long actually, just having a playable game that even like
Mhm.
looks okay. But it's all like the finishing stuff, like making sure you can boot it up and like it loads your save files and you can cleanly go to like a title screen and then into gameplay and then pause it and restart and go back to the
Right.
main menu and like go into settings and save your settings, all the user interface stuff, like all those little details like take a lot of time, you
Yeah, the
know?
the things the things you
Yeah.
don't notice when they do work, but do
Mhm.
notice when they don't work.
Yeah, like especially like in modern games, there's like the assumption that you should be able to pause. But even like, this pausing is not always the easiest thing. from a development standpoint. Like I think actually the game wasn't pausable when it came out.
Oh wow.
I think we added that after launch. Well, I think if you hit escape during a track, a menu would come up and then you could restart the track, but like you couldn't resume if you paused.
Or it's kind of like Elden
And that
Ring.
was, yeah, is that how, oh, that's true. But that was just because we're using this animation engine for all of the backgrounds, and it was like extremely hard to like pause the backgrounds. And in fact, I bet you can glitch out the backgrounds by pausing and unpausing, but that's fine, you know. But what kept us going, you know, like eventually it's just like far enough along, you're like, well, I can't throw it away, you know.
Right.
Like
You're
it's
almost there.
gotta
It's
finish it.
Yeah.
I will say too, a thing too is just like age. Like I mean our age, not the age of the game. I know
Right.
like, you know, when we started the game, I was like, I guess in my mid 30s. And it just like at the point in my life where I was like, you know, like we need to release like a real product at some point because everything we'd
Mhm.
done before that had been like mini games and web games and like little game jams. It's like if I'm gonna release like a real game, like a legitimate game that's like on Steam for sale, you know, like
Yeah, yeah.
it's got to happen. I can't like start again because then like I'll be like 40 by the time the first game comes out, you know.
Right, right. You want to
Yeah.
be able to hang your hat on something and kind of just say that, like,
Yeah.
even if God forbid it went nowhere, like you could at least say, I've done this, I have this, it's out there, it's for public consumption,
Yeah,
professionally put out.
it's like when you jam with people like in a band or something, but like you never actually record anything, you know? You can do that for a while and it's fun, but like once you do it for like once you're like 35 years old, it's like okay, like
It's shit or get off the pot. Yeah, that's
yeah,
it.
like you need to have like that's the age where you need to start actually like having tangibles, you know, like results, I guess is a way to put it.
Right.
So it was part of that too.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go to those
Yeah.
let's go to
Sorry.
those early days. Like what got you in to game development, and has your mind always been with some of these more sort of offbeat ideas? And I'm not just look at what you've suggested with Himbo House, Trombone Champ, your typing game. Like you guys, you don't. I've not seen a platformer from you, right? Like, do you?
That's true, yeah.
Have you always been more attracted to kind of the stranger ideas, or you just sort of fallen into
Yeah.
it?
I'll say not always, because you know, like I started as we always had like PCs in my house when I was growing
Mhm.
up, you know. So like and I played a lot of video games. So I think if you were like young and nerdy and played PC games in like the 90s, I think like it was common that you would like mess around with stuff to a certain degree,
Yeah.
you know. So I was always like working on stuff. I think like, you know, when I was younger, I didn't have the mindset of like working in like weird genres, you know. That's just kind of just like been an emergent thing, I think, as we've worked on games. And it's also
Interesting.
become like I think that's like we don't really have a mission statement, but that's like one of them now. If we did, is you mentioned platformers. Like I think every game we make, I want to make sure that it's something that like you can't point to another game and been like, oh yeah, it's just like that one, you know, except a little different.
Right.
I want everything we do to be like quite unique, which is kind of funny because I guess Trombone Champ is like very much like Guitar Hero, but at the same time, it's the way you actually play the music and like you really control
Yeah.
the notes and stuff is unique.
I mean, it's
But
like
there,
it's like
yeah,
Guitar Hero as much as like Dance Dance Revolution is like Guitar Hero, right? It's like
yeah,
I think Rhythm Game. Sure, they're both rhythm games, but like beyond that, stylistically, like what
mm,
you've done with it, and again, I bring up the baboon storyline,
mm,
the humor, the card collecting, and now some of the stuff you're introducing here in the VR version.
yeah,
It's very different. It offers so much more than the. All right, we're drinking in my dorm room. Let's play a round of Rock Band and move
yeah.
on.
It's I mean, I think like one thing that sticks in my head too is like duplication of effort. You know, like I kind of don't want to make a platformer just because so many people have already done that
Right.
and done it really well too. That's the problem. Is like there's so many games now that are fantastic. You know, so like I could make a platformer, but is it ever going to be like 1/10 as good as like Mario 3 or Super Mario or any of the million of indie ones? You know, and the same is true of like working in any genre that has a lot of games already in it.
Hmm.
Like I don't want to because there's too many games already, and there's like too many good games, you know. So
Yeah, to stand out, it seems like
yeah,
you either need to be excellent or have a
yeah,
really different, unique idea.
yeah. I was gonna
And
mention that I saw a screenshot of some guy's talk. I wish I knew the guy's name or the talk's name, but like one of the slides was that like you have two options. Like either you make something new, you know, or you do something like better than has ever been done before. And like obviously like number two is hard, you know, like
Yeah.
making something better than anything else has ever been done before. It's basically impossible. But it can be done. I mean, like, you know, on PS5, like everyone's raving over Astrobot. We don't have a PS5, but like
I
it looks
mean,
like a lot of fun.
line me up with
Yeah.
that group. I'm currently playing it right now, and I
It
mean,
looks like
look,
a blast.
it's
Yeah.
it's so much fun. It's not.
Yeah.
I'll say it's not. I think a lot of people are like, this is a Mario game. It's like it's not a
Yeah.
Mario game. That being said, I feel like if Sony could get out of their own ass, and I'm speaking for myself, but if Sony could
Yeah.
get out of their own ass with their business practices,
Mhm.
they could be lined up to be, up there with Nintendo if they just focused on making fun games and not
Yeah.
whatever the fuck Concord was supposed to be, right? Like,
I agree. Yeah. It's but that's like an example of number two. Like it's a 3D platformer. But it's done like amazingly well, you know.
Yeah.
And like not everyone can do that. But I totally agree about Sony. Like I used to like I had a PS2 and a PS3 and I used to love the brand, but you know what turned me off of Sony for a long time?
what?
It was when Smash Brothers came out for the Wii U. It was just called like Smash Brothers whatever. I forget what
Yeah.
that one was called.
Oh.
I remember like we didn't have a Wii U at the time, and I was like, you know, looking at Smash Brothers and like how good it looked. I was like, oh goddamn. So then I got that Sony game, the Sony one, like the
Oh,
All Stars
PlayStation All
Brawl.
Stars? Yeah.
Yeah, I got that, and it was so bad and so depressing, you know. And that was supposed to be the Sony version of Smash Brothers, where it's like all of the Sony characters, the Sony music, the Sony colors and aesthetic, you know.
Right.
And it was
right.
so bland and so boring. It really got me thinking. Like literally, that one game, like really turned me off of the brand for a very long time because it made me realize that like Sony used to have so much fun stuff, like Parappa and like even like Crash Bandicoot and stuff, like a lot of visually distinctive stuff, I guess. But now it's just all they're really lucky in that they have a monopoly in Japan of
Yeah.
like third-party developers, basically. Because like I shouldn't just talk shit about Sony in this whole podcast.
No,
Just
no, no.
make enemies. I'm just gonna just
The
talk about
views and
popular
opinions of
things,
Dan
yeah.
are not that of
Yeah.
Holy Wow Studios and do not
That's
represent.
true. But anyways, like, you know, a lot of what people love about Sony, I think, is just like Japanese third-party developers that happen to develop for Sony, and it's not really
Yeah.
Sony at all, you know. Like
Well, I mean,
even like Team Ico, like Team Ico stuff is incredible.
yeah, oh,
Is that really Sony? Not really. It's just like a studio who makes stuff on PlayStation because they're like, you know, like a super Japanese studio and they're not making stuff on Xbox, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like, yeah,
But there's some Santa Monica Studios, I think, is fully owned in by Sony, right? And I know they're doing.
owned by, yeah,
Yeah,
anyone-
I guess it's fair.
just they're just buying other companies though, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
that's been the nature of the beast. I mean, you could say the same. Like, I don't know, is Donkey Kong a Nintendo game or a retro game?
That's true. Yeah.
Right. And I think there are some things to it. I will say, to your point, I think Nintendo R&D and Nintendo, developers are often two different things. I don't disagree with you. I think the fact that, like, up until recently, the Astrobot demo that came free with the PlayStation 5 was one of the top 5 games for the system for a very long time, says something about the quality of Nintendo. One of the top 5 original Sony games. It says something about the quality of Sony games we had been getting. I fully agree with you there, and I think that I'm hoping Lessons in Astrobot kind of reminds them.
So.
We care more for like the God of Wars and the Uncharted's and the Astrobots than we do for the Destinies and the, like, I mean, I know a lot of people love Destiny, but like for me, it's like the microtransaction games as a service. It's like, no, here are some great single player experiences that fucking knocked it out of the park. That people love and we continue to talk about. And these are just feel so few and far between because you're busy trying to chase these trends instead. Xbox too, but at least Xbox falling flat in their face and they know it.
But I mean, I agree with you. Like I said the exact same thing when Astrobot came out. I was like, I hope they really take this as like a lesson, and then like just make fun games that are uniquely Sony. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And are just like just really fun first party games because that's what the system needs. But I feel like the PS5 Pro is kind of like the opposite because it's just one of the billions of problems with the game industry now is like all these platforms like are too powerful in a way, and like gamers now expect this level of graphical fidelity that most people aren't capable of, and not only most people aren't capable of, even like studios are not capable of it. Like even like a real ass game studio with like 100 people will have trouble making a game that looks like it should be a PS5 Pro game, and the gamers gamers who buy a PS5 Pro want a game that's like beautiful and has ray tracing because that's
Yes.
what they're paying for. But like, it's hard, like because
No.
it's
Well,
the budget
I've been
required.
standing
Yeah.
by this idea that like in the games industry is pushing far beyond its evolution, right? Like we are not there yet. They're pushing so hard for the future. The technology's not there. Instead of
Yeah.
doing something good with the tech we have, they're constantly trying to like go harder, better, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
They want to be in the future already, and they're too impatient to get to the future. And when we have
Yeah.
already have plenty good stuff here in the present. I mean, the PS5 Pro. I think I saw that thing that just angered me. Was annoyed
Yeah.
at like how expensive for what is essentially not much more fidelity. It's a
Yeah.
luxury item. It's the reason why assholes get a Tesla, right? Like it's the same basic
Yeah.
thing.
And it reminds me of it kind of reminds me of a little bit like that brief moment like 20 years ago or 15 years ago when like Peter Jackson and James Cameron were both pushing for like 48 frames per second in all theaters and 3D in all theaters, you know?
Yes.
And it's something where like in theory, yes, that's a better picture, you know, like I'm putting it in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
But in practice, like you can perfectly enjoy a movie that's in 1080p, even or even less, and
Yeah.
like 24 frames per second is fine, and 2D is fine. You know, these are limitations that we've like accepted when we watch movies. You know, no one's watching like like Mad Max on a nice 1080p screen, you know, or 4K screen and being like, I wish it was 3D. I wish it was 48 frames per second. You know,
Right.
although there probably are some people saying that, but they'll never be satisfied. You know,
Well, yeah, but at the same time,
Yeah.
you can do those things and
Yeah.
still have a bad movie. Like that's
true,
Like
yeah.
people watch Mad Max because the cinematography and the storytelling and the world
Yeah.
building is fantastic. That shit could be 480 and I'd still enjoy it, right? Like that's just how that is.
And the other big point too, like which brings
yeah.
me back to like the PS5 and modern consoles, is like if every movie theater was like 48 frames per second and 3D, and like all the major studios started to do that, then it becomes a lot harder for like anyone to break into movies because it's a million times harder to shoot in 48 frames per second in 3D, you know? So like
Yeah.
it just puts like a lot of pressure on indies. It creates like a bigger gap in graphics between indies and like major studios that like gamers might be resentful of, you know? Like there's already some people are like resentful of indies that have like pixel graphics, you know, they'll instantly scoff at it, but like that's partially because like the gap has grown so large, you know.
Yeah.
Like in order to harness this technology, even that Concord game that you mentioned, like I heard that like the credits scroll for like a full hour if you watch the credits, and they say that the
Jesus.
budget was $400 million or something, and like that's what it takes to like utilize an Xbox One X or a PS5 like to its fullest potential, you know.
Right. And
It's
the, and the
it's
indie
like it's
scene, the indie
untenable.
scene
Yeah.
is good at working within the limitations to make great games. You know, I think of games like Dave the Diver. You know, I'm a huge Hollow Knight fan. Like there's
Yeah,
all
game's
these
killer.
games that are just like, you know, work within limitations to still make magic.
Yeah.
I imagine that trying to work on these new technologies and match up to them can be difficult. However, one technology that you guys been able to match up to, I am good at what I do, damn it.
There you go.
Match up
That's
to
slick.
is
Yeah.
VR.
That's true,
Talk to
yeah.
me about how you guys approached taking a rhythm game, which is traditionally a very flat. Like I mean, I guess 3D in ways, but like in general, it's like it's hard to, you know, go through perspective on that in the same way. Usually the plane is very static. How did you guys think about approaching VR and how this all come together? I know you're working with a company now to help you get a development team now to help you translate some of the stuff over, correct?
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna turn on the ceiling fan because it's getting warm in here.
Oh yeah, do it.
Done. Yeah. So to brag a little bit, like
Please.
I think like you know when the PC game came out, it was you know it was much bigger than we expected. We expected like zero success, of course, because it's like a trombone. I say this, it's like a trombone game, so like it'd be ridiculous to expect it to take off, you know, in a
Right.
way. But you know, some companies actually like approached us and were kind of like interested in having it on their platforms, and actually like Meta or Facebook, like I think they shot us an email and were like, hey, you should make a VR version, you know. And they actually sent us 2 headsets for free, which is excellent. You know,
That's
we've had
awesome.
a lot of, yeah, actually, I'll give them credit for that. Like they didn't even, request anything. Maybe we shouldn't talk about this. It's fine. But like, yeah, and they just sent it, and it was something we thought about because like Beat Saber. Have you played Beat Saber? Have you
Yes.
played any PR games?
I have the, what is this? This is the Quest 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I think actually it was because again when I spoke with Jackie, the previous interview I did when I was doing this live, I had said I often scoffed at VR. I often thought like this is a luxury item. It's for the rich. It's not going to get mainstream adoption. Then I played Beat Saber and I was like, no, this is the greatest thing ever. Period.
Yeah, I feel the same. I had such a shitty attitude towards VR for a long time. I mean, I still am a little skeptical of whether it's like technically a good thing. Like I don't know. I just feel like in society nowadays, like the last thing we need is like a screen strapped to our like literally to our heads, because like the screen is all encompassing now. But
let me say, isn't the first thing we need an escape from reality?
That's
which
true.
in this political climate might not be too bad. So like,
I guess
feel like
that's
six
true.
of one, half a dozen of the other. But continue.
I totally agree with you. But no, you're absolutely right. We're like, it is very easy to scoff at VR until you play Beat Saber or something. Then you're like, oh man, this is really cool. Actually, like it's hard to describe. It doesn't, even like a YouTube video doesn't get it across. It's very hard to like describe the experience until you actually have it on. But we actually thought about it, and to be honest, like the idea kind of seemed kind of natural to us. Like in the 2D version, it scrolls left to right. So we're like, what if you're actually holding the trombone and like the music is somehow kind of scrolling at you, like in 3D? So the idea actually seemed kind of intuitive. Like we could visualize it, like imagine it pretty easily. And actually, the final product is kind of close to what we're imagining. Like you're on some sort of concert stage, and the music's coming at you. You're holding the trombone. And there's like a conductor who's like the main character, like in the flat, in the flat version, like you pick a character.
Yeah.
In this, like you're just playing as yourself because it's first person. But we thought like we should have some characters, so we have like a conductor who's like pretty close and is conducting. But again, like I think we really started to think about VR like after the Switch version, and by this point we're already kind of like a little burnt out on the game, And like this, because the Switch version is a lot of work. It was like more work than expected. And still it is like a bit of work actually. But so with the VR version, we're like, yes, like while I personally like to make this myself because I probably could and it might be fun. Like we should get someone else to help us with it,
Yeah.
Because actually developing for VR is a big pain in the ass too. Because like I'm sitting in front of my desktop. Typically you have to like sit at your desk with the headset on, at your computer and like have it plugged into your computer, which is a pain. And then like literally like, you're typing code, you're using Unity, and then you're just like raising and lowering the thing. It's sweaty. I personally like I get a headache too if I wear that thing for more than like 15 minutes because like just the way the strap cuts into your head,
Right.
So it's like just physically uncomfortable. So we're like, let's have someone else do this for us. So actually, we were actually approached a while ago by the Parda, the guy who made the very, very first mod for Trombone Champ in VR.
Oh, wow.
Which is really exciting. Like the PC version came out. He made this mod like a month or 2 months later or something. And it's still like the number one mod for the PC version to like make it VR.
Yeah.
So he reached out to us with like his friend and partner, like Elliot. And like they were like, hey, if you want to make a VR version, like, like we're available, So we agreed. It took a minute to actually get started because then they ended up like joining forces with like this Flat to VR Studios. So now they're at first it was just Pardo and Elliot, but now they're like working with this larger Flat to VR Studios. And it's kind of funny because like Trombone Champ was pretty much just like myself and Jackie working on everything.
Right.
But now the VR version has like a real team working on it. They have like bless you. They have like 10 times the number of people that we ever had working on the base game,
Wow.
Yeah, they have like a whole bunch of mappers who are working on like fixing up some of the maps and making more difficulties. They have like a bunch of 3D modelers because there's like a ton of 3D required for the VR version. They have someone like working on like the user interface to like make it more VR-ish.
Yeah.
And we're actually helping quite a bit. Like I'm making a lot of the music and helping with the storyline. I made the logo and like helping with a lot of motion graphics and various like stuff. Right. And we're both still pretty busy with it, but they were doing like 99% of the work. Thank God.
How is yeah? Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. How is the
Yeah.
experience of having to like communicate with a team like this? I mean, you're used to doing so much
Yeah.
of this. Kind of the two of you guys are sort of bootstrapping it on your own. Like, how has that juxtaposition been? And has that been a bit? Has there been a learning curve of like the communication side of just like getting what you want out of people you haven't really worked with before?
Not really. I think they're all
Okay.
like they're all very respectful of the base game, you know. Like they all like the base game. They have like a history with it, especially like I said, like Riker Parta, like, made the mod for the base game, so he's like super familiar with it.
Right.
Um, Everything's been going really well. I think the biggest challenge, which is like true of the main game as well, has been just like the size of the thing, the scope creep,
Yeah. Yeah.
And this has been like a common thread with us. Like when I when like I had the idea for Trombone Champ, I was like, oh, this would be really easy to make because it's a music game. All I need is like 20 songs and it's done. Like I don't need to
Famous
make
last
levels.
words.
I know, but then it ended up being like so much bigger than expected because I added a lot of story bullshit and like all the cards, and like a lot of
Right.
wacky stuff. And the same is true of the Switch version. I think the team that picked up the Switch version, I mean, they're also great to work with. I love those guys.
Right.
They're all really great. But I think they looked at the PC one and were like, oh, this would be really easy, like piece of cake. And I think it ended up being more work for them as well. Like that went over schedule a little bit, and like I think it was just more difficult just because it's not a platformer. Like
Right.
it requires like the trombone motion. So there's so many, like we really utilize like the IR camera and the motion control and
I feel like
stuff.
much like the game itself, it's deceptively simple. In
Yeah,
some ways.
deceptively complex. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And the same, and with VR too, the same thing I think has kind of happened again, where like we started off very small in scope. We're like, we're just gonna have it be just the gameplay, keep it like small and lean, like probably no storyline stuff. I don't know. But then actually the team has like actually gotten some like additional like funding and stuff, and
Okay.
so and gotten some requests to bring back the fun wacky stuff for the PC version. I think what happened is like we started off with like a very small version that was just like gameplay and nothing else. But then the
Right.
feedback we're getting is like, it's kind of missing like some of the magic of the original because it doesn't have all this extra stuff. So now we're like, it has like its own storyline now.
Oh
It's like
wow.
related. It's related to the base game storyline, but it's like a new story, And like so we're
Interesting.
just adding a lot to it actually, and it's like it's grown really big. Like I think there's like 50 custom trombones now, each which has like their own 3D models. Like they're
Wow.
real, like they're putting a lot of work into this, and there's like a lot of stuff in here. Like they have it's grown, bigger than expected. But
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's talk about
yeah.
what are some of the things
Mm.
that you guys are adding in here that are new, spoiler free.
Yeah.
Like it does. I believe there's the trombone customization.
Yeah.
There is what looks like from the trailer alone, looks like a campaign mode kind of thing,
Yeah.
like a branching map. Like, yeah, talk to me about some of these new features you guys have added in.
I guess if you list them out on paper, it's not a tremendous number of features, but they're all pretty big, as you mentioned. Like
Yeah.
first, there's like a real campaign now. I think one problem with the PC game is like the number of songs we've added. Where
Hmm.
it's like when you play the PC game, like when you start the game, you have this one warm up song, and like you have to start with that. But then after you beat warm up, everything is unlocked. So it kind of goes from like too little to too much now, I think. Like you go from warm up to like 66 songs, It's
Right,
like
because
it's
you've
enormous
continued to
list.
add more, and there's not an unlockable from that perspective.
Yeah. So I think that was something they really wanted in the VR one. So now there's actually this cool campaign, which also is like tied into the storyline,
That's great.
where basically, I mean, there's a lot to it. It looks really cool, but like you unlock songs in groups, and like you move from group to group of songs, by completing challenges and stuff.
Okay.
Um, so it's actually pretty robust. Like you can spend a long time going through that, and that's how you actually unlock a lot of the secret stuff. But also, there is also a mode where you could just play whatever song you want from the get-go.
Yeah.
So for people who don't want to have to like unlock every song, you could just do that too.
Like the
Um,
exhibition, just hop in and play.
yeah, exactly. There's that. As you mentioned, there's like customization. Some of the people who on this team like have a ton of experience with VR and like they've done this before. So they have all this cool stuff where like we didn't expect this. Like this wasn't in our original idea, but like you can
Oh,
literally just like
interesting.
spray paint your trombone, like just pick up a spray paint can and like spray paint. You can like draw on it with a marker. You can like dip it into paint, like various sections and stuff. And it saves, so you could just like doodle all over your trombone and stuff. It's super cool.
That's
Um,
awesome.
it's really cool actually. It's like one of the coolest things that we didn't expect. Um, there's more. There's a lot more. Again, like there's a ton of cool trombones. I don't want to spoil any, but
Yeah,
like some of
please.
them have,
Spoiler free.
yeah,
We want people to play it because it is, and it is. If it's anything like the base game that's based off of,
yeah,
absolutely worth playing through and
yeah.
giving it a shot.
One of the things we're working on, well, one of the things I was personally contributing to last week was like sound effects for some of these trombones, because like we have these like big 3D trombones, and like some of them it's like, oh, this should make like a special sound, because look at
Hmm.
it, So like I was making a bunch of like sounds. I'll spoil one. There's like a plunger trombone. It's like a big plunger. So like I was trying to find like plunger sound effects online, but then I was like, forget it. And I just like actually like, took a plunger and went to like our toilet, and it was just like set up the microphone, put it into the toilet, and was trying to like really capture
Oh
Lena's plunging
wow,
sounds. It's a really disgusting sound, so I'm excited about that.
that's
It
beautiful.
it's
Beautiful music.
Yeah, but last week, we were making a bunch of sound packs for a bunch of various trombones like that. We're like, they should make some custom sound. So, um, and there's a lot more to it too. Also, just like it is a very different graphical approach too, because like
Right.
the base game in the PC version, there's just like each song is like a flat background just behind the track.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like those flat backgrounds actually are like kind of projected around this auditorium, so you can still get them and see them. But like the main thing is you're in front of like a big audience, and
Right.
like the audience reacts and they clap and stuff, and like they clap and boo. That was one of the things that like we wanted to make sure was in the game, that like you can get booed, because like
Yeah.
part of the fun of the game is like playing badly.
Oh, for
Like
sure. Yeah.
the worse you play, the funnier it is. So we wanted to like highlight that.
The
Yeah.
backgrounds is an interesting point you bring up because yeah, that there is so much the humor in that alone of some of the stuff. When you're busy play, it's funny because I've had it pop up now a couple times during cheap plug World's Greatest
Mm.
Gamer
Oh,
when as
yeah.
a
Yeah.
for the event, and it's usually a hoot when it lands on that because people aren't expecting it, and of course like when you're playing it, you're not paying attention to the background. But
Yeah.
the viewers during the
Mm.
during the event who aren't playing are watching and are getting a kick out of that.
Nice.
But as you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's the flat background and trying to translate that into a VR space. I imagine it's probably been a little difficult in order to get everything in there.
Yeah, and that was one of the things actually the team was working on recently is at first like we didn't have the flat backgrounds at all, or we did like, but
Right.
they're very small. And then some of the feedback we got was that like every song kind of starts to feel the same because like
Mm.
you're playing them all in an auditorium. So then they're working on like projecting the existing flat backgrounds like across the 3D space in a few places. It looks
Interesting.
really cool actually, and it works really well. I'm actually impressed with like how capable the Quest headset is, because it's just like there's a lot going on graphically. Like there's like a whole audience. Like the trombone like looks better than it does in the 2D version. Like the
Hmm.
notes are coming at you in 3D, and we're also like projecting stuff on, like we have a bunch of like render textures, like projecting like the background. There's a lot going on, but it runs super smoothly. It runs really great.
Yeah.
So it's
As
funny. Yeah.
as a you and Jackie as a small team with
Mm.
lots of ideas,
Yeah.
has working on this gotten the gears turning a little bit on VR specific games?
No, no.
That was fast.
That's, I think, okay. No, being very careful about what I say. VR is kind of a trap for a lot of indie developers, I think.
Interesting.
Like this happens a lot, where like a lot of indie developers will like get a VR headset. They're like, "Oh, this thing is cool as hell, I'm gonna make a VR game." But then it's just like impossible. It's very difficult to market a VR game, especially if you're
Right.
an indie and especially if it's like a new idea, and you have like very little, because like Steam, you could upload anything to Steam. It's like this massive thing. The
Hmm.
VR just marketplace is so much smaller. Like fewer people have a VR headset.
Yeah.
Thing is
Yeah.
like if a game that sells on Steam and is slightly popular will probably sell more like total units than a game that's on VR that's like very popular. Just because
Interesting.
like there's not that many, most people don't have VR headsets. And
Yeah. Yeah. The
and
the
even
mark
the
the market
yeah,
share is not there.
it's small. It's still small. It's growing, but it's small. And also even the people who do have headsets, like they're not always shopping for games. And I'm guilty of this too. Like we have a
Hmm.
VR headset now, of course. But like 99% of the time I just like turn it on. I play a little pistol whip, I play a little Beat Saber, and then I turn it off, and like that's all I do, you know. And
Fair.
now I test Trombone Champ too. But like, it's very rare that I like want to open up the store and get new games, because like, have you played Pistol Whip on yours?
I have.
Yeah,
It's funny. I'm not now. Pistol Whip's not a horror game,
yeah,
but
yeah.
so I'm prefacing that. I'm not a horror guy, and
Mhm.
the idea of people kind of just like jumping out or like
Yeah,
I have to very quickly respond to someone who all of a sudden is right there,
yeah,
like kind of jump scares freaks me out a little bit. I enjoy Pistol Whip. It was a
yeah.
good workout for sure, but it's one that I really couldn't do as much because my anxiety would start acting up.
I know what you mean. Yeah. But that's one thing I like about VR is like the workout aspect actually.
Yes.
Like I have these like 2 pound weighted gloves and like I
Oh,
always wear it. I wear them like religiously when I play. And it's actually like, especially in the winter months, like when we're not
that's
leaving.
smart.
Yeah, you should get some. Just
I
get a
might I
bunch of
might do
stuff.
that. I was a
It's
big
fun.
fan of
Yeah.
playing for a while. Did you play Ragnarok?
No, the is
It,
that
it
the VR one or the
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 VR
guy?
one.
Yeah.
It is
Okay.
it is also a rhythm game, but basically
Interesting.
You're a Viking with four drums and you're
Yeah.
hitting the beat to make your ship go faster to
Yeah.
various heavy metal tracks.
That's cool.
Not a heavy metal guy, but as a
Yeah.
fantasy as a D&D and fantasy nerd,
Mm.
it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you really get into like the epic power metal ballad of some of these moments of like
That's cool.
hitting the drums with it there. And it's good for and also very sweaty game. A game that
Yeah.
gets to be very
Oh
sweaty.
man, that's the thing. I mean, that's one thing I hate about the VR headset too. I mean, let's just talk shit about VR for a long time.
Yeah.
It's again like in the winter months, it feels so good to like get just play some Beat Saber games and actually
Right.
get like a pretty good workout. But you sweat so fast in that thing, and then they
Yeah.
fog up so fast, and it's so gross. Like
Yeah.
I was like, how do I wash this thing out? But you're
No.
saying like you're talking about like ideas. Yeah, I do have ideas for VR actually. Like one thing that drives me nuts about VR is there's so many gun games and actually a good number of music games. There's
Mhm.
no like flying a little spaceship game that I could find that was any good.
Yeah,
You know, like
actually.
X-Wing versus like a X-Wing or TIE fighter game. And like to me it's like it's such a no-brainer that like I kind of want to just make one. But again, at the same time, I'm like, no, we have too many other ideas, and VR is too difficult and too small of
Yeah.
a market, and like
Yeah,
it's
I think VR
yeah,
is again. I bring up like kind of the PS5 Pro we were talking about earlier, a luxury
yeah,
item, right? I think one of the big problems is one of my biggest fears in the games industry in general
yeah,
is a lack of accessibility, right?
mm, yeah,
Because right now the PlayStation and the Xbox are just trying to get more and more expensive.
yeah,
VR is kind of an expensive item that most people don't stick with too much. I mean, when you get a good game, you get a good game and you play it.
yeah,
But like, I don't bust out my VR headset as often as say I play the PS5.
mm,
And PCs are, you know, super expensive and it's
yeah,
a hard market for a casual person to break into, which really just leaves the Switch.
yeah,
And my fear on that is that, you know, whereas before growing up, I felt like any household, doesn't matter what their income was, you just often had at least one system of some type.
yeah,
Now it feels as though we are getting away from that, and people of various classes aren't able to access this medium that honestly has inspired so many people, you guys for example,
yeah,
to do amazing new things in the art form. The more we cut people off from their access to gaming, the less interesting games and the new perspectives in this art form we get.
yeah.
And it's one of those things that always kind of scares me.
It's a really good point. Yeah, especially you're absolutely true. I mean, absolutely right about especially Xbox and PlayStation, where
Yeah.
like a base PS5 is expensive. A PS5 Pro is expensive. Xbox, I don't even remember what they have. I think the Series X or something, which is really
Yeah, yeah.
expensive. But like, clearly, they want you to get the expensive one, you know. And beyond
Of
that, too,
course.
the controllers piss me off no, too because they're so expensive. I forget how much a PS5
it
controller is, but it's like eighty
it's like
dollars or
yeah, it's like
something.
almost the price of a game. Like
Yeah,
it is getting more and more prohibitive. That to
it's
be
tough.
said
Yeah.
though, if you do happen to have
Mm,
a PC, a
yeah.
Switch, and now a VR headset,
Mm,
I highly suggest picking up Trombone Champ or Trombone Champ Unflattened.
Pick them all up.
Pick them all up. Get them on every platform. I am truly looking forward to Unflattened as a reason to pick back up my VR headset, because honestly, the original game is so silly, and we need more people taking themselves far less seriously.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we always want to try to make games that are like funny, but also kind of like joyous. I think that's another mission statement thing. Like, I want to avoid like grim games where you shoot people with guns, because
we got too many. They even did that to Sonic with Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, we got too many.
True.
Like,
first of all, it's been done to death, like we've already talked about. But also, like you only live once, and like you got to think about like what you're leaving behind on this world, and like in games, there are some like amazing games which are fun and like uplifting, and then there's like games where you shoot people, and those can be fun too. But like
oh yeah. Oh no, I've enjoyed plenty of stress relieving, violence now and then, but like it's still just such a narrow. Imagine if every movie was just a Jean-Claude Van action movie. You'd have less people seeing movies. Like we need variety, spice of life, and when we can do again, so many people will often say everything's been done. Why bother? It's
not
important.
Even close.
It's important for people like you to come in and say, no, here's something I'm doing, and it cost me 2% of what it costs these big companies to make a game that you kind of enjoyed for 2 months.
It's funny, like one of the reasons I want to one thing I'm trying to do with games is like just avoid guns, just because they, as you said. Partially a little bit the politics, but also secondly just because it's been done so much, and there's so many things that have not been done. Like even like I can't think of a modern first-person shooter where like you have a wizard staff instead of a gun, and you could like shoot fireballs instead of. It's such a simple idea. It's not even an original idea.
Honestly,
not even a creative idea.
Not since Hexen, I believe, has we had a first-person wizard game.
And it's not even like that's not even like a creative idea. It's just something simple, but like no one's doing it. And even like I think about that Stray game, which, we never played it, but, the cat game.
Yeah, adorable.
And people loved it. And I'm like, why was that the first big 3D cat game? Like, everyone loves cats. It's not even like an esoteric idea. It's just a game where you play as a cat in a city. It's like such a simple idea. There's so many like simple ideas that like are out there, to be done, if you just move beyond like recreating what's already been done.
We'll talk off camera about it because I'm not ready to advertise it yet. But there's an idea I'm working on right now in that same vein of just like, why hasn't anyone done this? If we stop all trying to do the same thing, something magical can be made.
And I think when you have, sorry, I'm trying to wrap this up and I just keep talking. But I think that's when you know you have a really good idea too. Is like when it seems like a common sense idea, but it hasn't been. But you can't think of a good example. Like like Stray is a perfect example. Like someone at the studio is like, let's make a cat game. Hasn't been done, and probably was like shocked that it hadn't been done recently. Or to that scale. If you have an idea that's like it shocks you that you can't think of someone else having done it recently, then that's like usually a good sign.
You should absolutely go for it. I think there's more games like that, more games like Trombone Champ, more games that are common sense, but also are just unique, I think will push things forward. Now, you point out that I was trying to end things. I wasn't necessarily trying to end things. I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure I had enough room to be able to ask which Tendo sister and why is Nabiki the best.
Okay, that's right. I was going to turn this into an entire bit where I was going to only talk about Ranma, but we didn't talk about Ranma at all. Now, I think what happened was like we just watched it on an absolute whim because like I saw the tile on Tubi and I liked the artwork and I saw it was from like 1988 or something. Or 89. It's old, and I love like the style of some of the old animes. But we ended up like watching the whole thing, which is like a lot of episodes.
It's so good. It's been a little longer since I've watched it. For myself, that was like people. I'm a person with certain vintage. People talk about their awakening in like middle school and stuff being, for my era, it's like Carmen Electra, Pamela Anderson. It's that. For me, it was truly the discovery of anime, and discovery of anime through Ranma 1/2. because it was the only. I'm gonna get a little crass here, so forgive me. It was the only cartoon I'd ever seen that still felt funny and silly and had the right sense of humor. But I also saw boobs as
once in a while.
as a pre-pubescent boy, and just like casually in a way that was, or sometimes for effect. Now I don't know how well the show holds up now. It has been a minute, but I will say it's always as something that introduced me to Japanese culture across the board, and I've kind of righted myself in the 20 to 30 some odd years since. But like a great fucking show.
It's great. It does hold up. One thing. Like when I saw the concept, I was like, "Oh, geez, this is going to be like so absurdly sexist."
Yeah.
But actually, one thing that it kind of redeems it, I think, is just that it was written by a woman.
Yes.
Like a female artist and writer, like creator, making it, which I think actually really like. If it was a dude making it, I would look at it a lot more skeptically.
It'd be horrible.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because like some parts are super regressive. Like there's the old like grandpa character who just steals panties all day long, and like he's in so many episodes, and it's ridiculous. And it's like, but then one thing I find really progressive about the show is that like it's built on the premise that Ranma turns from like a man into a woman when he touches water, and vice versa when it's hot water.
Right.
And so it just sounds like such like an idea ripe for just like sexism and just like gender stereotypes.
And
But one really funny thing is like all the characters accept that fact so quickly. There's like within a few episodes, he's like changing from man to woman, and like nobody really cares. And a lot of times it barely matters, like people will barely comment on it. No one's grossed out by it.
Right. Right.
It's really interesting in that way, It's hard to describe. Like I remember seeing there's some YouTube video that's talking about like in American movies, like there's a trope with like old movies that like people see like a transsexual woman and like barf. Like a lot of like old comedies from like the 80s will have like the same scene where like a guy kisses a woman, finds out it's a man, then he barfs. You know what I mean? And this is kind of the opposite, where like Ranma is just like changing genders constantly and just like a part of the family, and no one judges him. Like he doesn't like it. He identifies as like a man and wants to be a man, but like everyone else is fine with it, which is so interesting. I don't know.
No,
and again,
I think,
like especially since it's from like 1989 or something.
Yeah. Have you heard they're doing it's being remade and brought to Netflix, at least Netflix Japan or something? I'm curious how that if it's just going to be a graphical upgrade or if it's going to be like some major changes. But I'm excited to revisit that whole the whole family and all that the very very odd cast of characters for the show.
It's really funny actually. Like I laugh when watching that more than like any other anime for sure. Like times 10. It's really funny.
It's a very very silly, very funny. I'm here to plug you, but I'll also say that if you haven't watched Ranma One Half, it's an absolute classic. It taught me what okonomiyaki is, and it's my favorite food in the world now. Like it's
started to make that.
Really?
Yeah, like actually, like after watching all the episodes of Ukiyo, like I got a bunch of cabbage and like the mix and stuff. We've been making it at home.
Oh my god, that's fun. Amazing! I'm going to Japan in literally about a week, and cool. I'm hoping for sure to get. I've been before, and I got okonomiyaki then too, and I was like, I need to make sure to get the good stuff while I'm there. Boots on the ground and eat. I was very happy when Jackie brought that up that you would want to talk about that, because it was like
I think we're watching Ranma, and then she showed me a tweet of yours, and you like were talking about your awakening, and there's a picture of Nabiki, and I was like, it was just funny because like I think we just started watching it, so I'd only seen Nabiki once or twice, and I remember being like, Nabiki, that's a really interesting choice. But now like now that we finished the show, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I know what you mean.
Yeah. It's of the three sisters, I always thought she was by far the coolest, and just I think I had the biggest crush on her because she was kind of like relaxed enough, was more relaxed than Akane. And absolutely not as like demure as Kasumi, and in that very Japanese, like almost sexist kind of demure.
Yeah, I agree. Sexist, but we could talk about this for like hours. But there's also something a little sad about Kasumi, because one thing the show does that they never talk about is like the mothers are missing from the show. You know, like I forget the Tendo dad's name, but like he's just like raising the daughters by himself, and like the mothers died, but you don't know they don't talk about it, just like it happened before the show starts,
Yeah.
And so Kasumi, yeah, she's filled that role, so that's like the slight sadness there, like she's totally picked up the slack, with the
Right.
missing parent. Yeah.
I feel
Anyways.
like if there were
Yeah.
if there was a more modern sensibility would do justice to her character and flesh that out a bit more.
Yeah. One thing I'm not looking forward about the remake though is the music, because I love the music in the Japanese version is so weird. It's the weirdest music ever.
The main theme at the very beginning of the series, like it's
killer.
It's so good, but it is very, it's all again very silly.
Yeah, the music is intense. Like it's this. There's like it's not on Spotify. I wish it was, but there's like a YouTube video. It's just like all of the music from the show.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, let it play, because like there's so many weird arrangements in that show, and I you can tell in the trailer they're going to change all the music up, which anyways.
Well, then we'll have to just mod it in to Trombone Champ that will have the level creator built in.
Yeah.
Grab the songs, throw it in there, and get an all-new experience with the classic Ranma in Trombone Champ. Dan, thank you so much for hopping on. Where can people find you?
You mean like in life?
I guess if you wanted to find you on the street, but I would just argue
Brooklyn,
social's probably safer.
Yeah, Holy Well Studios. It sucks. Like social media sucks now, man. It sucks.
Yeah.
Like we used to be biggest on Twitter, but now Twitter is just like disintegrated. But whatever, follow us anyways on Twitter, Holy Well Studios. We post on Instagram a lot more now, I think, because it's like a little less nightmarish. But
it's a necessary evil for advertising. Lord knows, if I felt like anyone could discover me by stumbling upon my videos, I'd be off it too. I get it.
But I guess we're on Blue Sky too. I don't know, search for Holy Well Studios and just click whatever you find.
Great, awesome.
Follow it all. Yeah.
And of course, guys, you can go ahead, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've been doing so many great interviews like this one, so please check us out. I am at Boss Monster Kaiju everywhere but Twitter, where it's Boss Monsta Kaiju, because A, I can't have nice things, and B, I'm never going to call it X. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Stay cool, stay hip, stay heavy. Good night.